if you're anything like me, then you probably want to get rid of the poverty in the world. You want to get rid of the wars. You want to get rid of the polarization that goes on, if you're anything like me, that is, and bringing much more happiness, abundance, harmony to everybody's life. So when I was in San Francisco last year, I discovered that I've got a Facebook friend staying not too far away from where I was living, which is about 2 hours drive. And I looked him up and I was blown away because he is doing exactly what I want to do when I grow up. He calls himself the Renaissance Man. He works on a project called the Renaissance Project. He's a former CEO of the HeartMath Institute, I should say. And he's been in the corporate world, but he's also a performer. He's also helping to transform the state of the planet through his work, through his philosophy. Anyway, today we're going to interview Bruce Cryer. So welcome to the Harun Rabbani Show. Thank you so much, Bruce, for joining the Harun Rabbani Show. It's a pleasure having you. Why is creativity so important to every single person listening or watching this interview, this show?
Creativity to me is the energy that allows us to not only create fantastic career, jobs, art, but it is the energy that solves problems. And some of us were very fortunate. I consider myself one of the fortunate few who had my creativity always encouraged as a child. And so I run into very challenging situations in my life, and I nearly always have sort of there's got to be a creative answer to this attitude. Many people were not encouraged to be creative. And so that energy that can solve and to create and to have fun and to be playful and to sing and to dance and to be poetic, if that's what they choose to do, has been shot down and shut down by parents, by siblings, by bosses, by coworkers. And so that energy that wants to contribute, it wants to add and wants to think out of the box, or however you want to put it, has been shot down. And so that our company suffers because of that. It's not there. Our life suffers because we're not living in sync with what we truly feel. So to me, creativity is the fundamental energy of life. And so we need it big time.
You've been involved in the corporate field. You've been involved in acting. Do you, for the sake of our listeners, our viewers, can you share a quick rundown from where you were to where you are now? Because there's a big stark difference from where you were before. So perhaps you can share that.
Well, brief synopsis of my career. First job, I was a musical theater guy on Broadway in New York in my late teens and 20s. And had a lovely run and did a number of big shows and did television commercials and a few small films. At a certain point, my spirit said, there's something more to life than being on stage entertaining people. I was drawn to California, drawn to the creativity of the Bay Area in particular. And by the work around consciousness and health and spirituality, and I was very drawn out there. Got involved initially in a publishing company that led to being brought into a nutrition company. In both cases, very innovative, kind of groundbreaking companies, which then got me invited into a new company called HeartMath, which, as you know, a groundbreaking company understanding more about researching the role of the heart in brain intelligence, but also in our ability to manage stress. And all that was great. And I was part of the original team and part of the leadership team from day one, and eventually CEO for 11 years. And then my kind of dark years of the soul, the 2-year period I hit, series of significant health issues, as you know, hit me. And suddenly life kind of came screeching to a halt, although I didn't stop being CEO, and had to deal with cancer and a number of things, and including the loss of my mother. And in the aftermath of this very harrowing couple-year period, which thank God I'm now 9 years cancer-free, I'm 8 years staph infection-free, I'm 7 years dancing on titanium hips. Life is good. But it took another transformation to happen inside of me, where I realized I had gotten so far away from my creative spirit. I was managing a company, a complex international company, and that had made me sick in a certain way because I wasn't honoring that part of me that wanted to create. And in my case, I wanted to sing, I wanted to dance, I wanted to be artistic. And so I kind of got back into that, stepping down from the CEO role of HeartMath back in 2011, and kind of dipped my toes in a little bit and got a project going with music and inspiration. And then it kind of ramped up in the past 14 months to include creating an album of original music, deciding to make a move back to New York City, where I hadn't lived in decades, and to begin a career here that's a combination of all that I love, to mentor leaders, to work with executives, to create music, to create beauty. And it's a very fun life. And it's been quite a journey. And we'll see where the next phase goes.
A number of things, because when we met last year, you were in Northern California, and you were also working in places like Stanford University as a lecturer and traveling to the East Coast as well. Now, bearing in mind that you went through this whole journey of moving from corporate world and then going back into the world of creativity. Now, what about CEOs, business owners, influencers who are listening now? And they're wondering, well, hold on, does that mean, in order for me to be creative, does that mean I've got to drop my corporate life? Can I not do this at the same time as my corporate life? What do you say to people like that?
Yeah, the answer is no. I have not dropped my corporate life. I've got these other things going on now, like an album, and I did a concert last week here in New York City, launching the album. And it was a week after I'd done a talk to 15 CEOs who were part of a Vistage group. And the talk was a 3-hour workshop about creativity and innovation. One of my points is that this is not a message of just do what makes your heart sing and forget your responsibilities, forget what's practical, forget the aging parents you have to take care of. That's not the real world. And so for many people, because they're not doing anything particularly creative on the side, if you will, that juice, I've talked to CEOs who can't wait to go to their songwriting class or can't wait to go to their meditation class, can't wait to go to their hiking group that they do once a month to go through the mountains, because those activities fulfill their spirit and get them out in nature and get them out doing creative things. So to me, when people who have that balance, who do the active things that they love to do but don't necessarily pay any bills, in fact, may cost money, create the kind of balance that a CEO needs to be able to think holistically, think with the big picture, think beyond just the immediacy of the urgent problem that there may be. So that's the message that I have, and that's the same message to anyone. It's not about switching careers necessarily. I have the fortune that I'm able to kind of do a number of different things that I maybe can get paid for, hopefully. But it's not, the point is not to necessarily switch into that, but how can you enrich your life now? One great story, a friend of mine who's a physician in South Africa, and she in college was needing to decide whether she was going to go full into art or full into medicine. And the practical, right, the left side of her brain said medicine, that's the practical career choice, right? So for the next 20 years, she was a very successful physician. But there was a part of her, there was this craving to take a sculpture class. And she finally did it, literally 20 years later. And her life changed, but not because she decided to become a full-time sculptor. In the act of working with her hands and molding clay and creating new things, she started having ideas about how she could recreate her medical practice to be more fulfilling. So the act of doing something creative that was a pure hobby for her awakened ideas about her career that transformed her family life, her professional life, etc. So that's the message I'm trying to get out.
So that's absolutely love that. I find that really fascinating. So I want to look at the dark side of creativity, meaning what happens to individuals, humanity, etc., when we suppress our own creativity?
Well, I got cancer. I'm not saying it's completely linked to the suppression of my own creativity, but it was a huge wake-up call when I had these series of things happen and had many hours to reflect while I was waiting for the next procedure or recovering from the last one. And I began to see that, wow, how has this happened? I'm doing nothing creative anymore. Even in my business life, when I started out, I was in very creative roles, designing things. I did a lot of graphic design and oversaw a lot of marketing activities. Little by little, we hired people at HeartMath that would do all of that. They would manage that and implement that. And they didn't really want the CEO messing around with it. And so little by little, I realized the creative outlets that I had, I designed the first several iterations of the HeartMath website. Well, CEOs don't do that. And they don't even want you involved until the very last minute, right? So I realized, wow, all this creative energy that I have to contribute has nowhere to go anymore. And I know that was backing up in my system, not saying that's the only cause. So, but I think even more than that is a certain depression, really, or a certain resignation can set in, where we feel like, well, I could try, but this happens in companies a lot, where you're a creative person, but you're in the sales department, and you want to make suggestions for operations because you see that from a sales standpoint, the customer's not being handled well. The operations people don't want to hear it because they say, well, stick to your knitting, Harun. You're great at sales, but just keep to that. Well, the company loses because you may have fantastic ideas because you are in the front line, because you do have a sensitivity to people. And the company misses that, thinking the operations people know it all. Well, maybe they're never out with customers. Maybe they really don't know it all. So I think that's one example that you lose, because that energy that's in you to contribute and to create has been shot down, and you eventually just say, well, why bother? Why bother make any suggestions then? And then the company loses as well, and the customer loses. It's lose, lose, lose.
So how do you activate your own creativity and perhaps activate your team's creativity? What are the different parts that we can talk about?
Yeah. Well, I started, as you've mentioned, I've been teaching at Stanford now. I think it's the 21st or 22nd year. And most of that time is spent around HeartMath and the beautiful work around stress and performance and resilience. But as I got into my own renaissance, or renaissance, as you would say in the UK, around creativity, I approached this group at Stanford and said, I'd like to develop a course for you around connecting creativity and well-being. And because there is a link, when we are in a creative flow, our body is working differently. Our heart is beating in a smooth pattern. The right biochemicals are being produced that give us euphoria, or at least happiness and pleasure. And so physiologically, we're entirely different. Creativity as a link to well-being. And as I reflected on how I would teach that, I thought, well, what did I do? Because I had been a highly creative person younger, and then little by little, I kind of let it go. Through no one stopped me, but it happened. And so I realized there were kind of 5 elements that I had done, not through any design, just because this was how my life unfolded. That was how I did it. And mindfulness was number 1, mindfulness with heart, and just becoming more aware of how could I look at that in a more creative way? How could I look at this issue that's just come across my desk from a client in a more creative way? The second element being movement. When my movement was restricted badly because of the arthritis in both my hips, and I could not run any longer, and I couldn't hike any longer, and even walking was painful, and even getting in and out of a car was agony, I became highly aware of how important movement had been and how I had lost it. Then after I had both hips replaced, gradually I could start to move again, and then I realized I've got to move. I've really got to move. And then somebody said, let's try this dance thing. I think you might like it. I said, you're crazy. There's no way I could dance. And within a couple months, I was dancing, several times a week for hours. And what happened was, in me, this kind of stagnant energy that had happened from being sick for a couple of years and kind of looking at my whole life and realizing I had to make some big changes. I ended up leaving my marriage. I ended up stepping down as CEO of HeartMath, moving. A lot needed to happen. Things were stuck. And to start to move again, to start to be able to hike again, and then in my case, to be able to actually dance again, movement was hugely important in kind of getting my creative energies going again. And plus just to feel better, feel more fun, all the biochemical reasons why exercise matters, especially if it's exercise that you enjoy. And then the third one is to be out in nature. Now you saw, we met in this marvelous town was my home for several years, called Sausalito. Now I live in Brooklyn, and people would say, well, why, what are you thinking? That's a pretty big change. I live 5 minutes from the ocean, and I get down there every single day. And to be able to walk on an ocean every day, everybody can't do that. And I feel very fortunate. So I live in a concrete jungle called New York City, but I live close to an ocean. So I figured out a way to make it work where I'm getting the refreshment of nature. Because, I think most people can relate to the idea that when we're stuck trying to make a decision about career, strategic partner, market decision, whatever it may be, that many of us have a place that we go to try to figure that out. It could be to a beach. It could be a walk in a certain woods. It could be you're going to a certain lookout point where you can kind of see the town. And from up there, the air is fresh, and something is different, and your perspective is different. So we intuitively know that nature can help us clarify our thinking. And now we know biochemically the value of nature to us is massive. So that was the third element that I just intuitively was doing. I got to get out of nature more if I'm going to survive this, let alone the future. The fourth one was playfulness. And this is a gift from my mother in particular, to some degree my father. But it hit me during this whole journey of my health crisis that if I didn't approach it with a light heart as often as possible, could be a really challenging time. And the first diagnosis was one thing, it was cancer. It wasn't until the treatments that I got the second one, which was staph infections. Then it got into my blood. So it was like one thing after another. Then the hips got worse and worse and worse, and I had to deal with that. So, I had to somehow look at this like, okay, it looks like I'm on the drama train. This is like a series of dramatic events, and then my mother passed away. So I had to try to approach it with a light heart. But what I found when I realized through all of that was, well, that's the creative process. Because anybody who really is creative for a living, like an actor, a poet, a singer, a dancer, knows, or an artist that just flings stuff at the canvas. There is that necessity to have a childlike spirit a lot of the time, to just be willing to experiment. Kids just mess things up and don't care. Adults have reasons why that's not okay. And so that clamps down on our creative energy. And that's part of why I think it's so important in business too. The people, to me, in business that are so valuable are the ones you go to when there's a really challenging situation, because you'll say to yourself, Harun, let's get Harun's input on this, because he's got a way of looking bigger at things. And he won't be overly dramatic about it either. He's going to say, okay, we'll deal with this. Okay, we can do this. No, we've got a solution for this. Then the last one for me was the artistic expression, the fifth element, which I needed to start to explore things like that again. I needed to sing again. I needed to try dancing again, in the process of doing things that I loved. And I hear this over and over again from people that, they hear my story and they say, God, you're inspiring me. I used to sing all the time and I just stopped. Why did I stop? I said, same reason I did. There wasn't one. You let it go. You let life intervenes and other things become more the priority. And it's not like everybody's got to do all five, but for me, those five were what happened. And that's how I kind of got back into feeling creative on a regular basis.
This is so mind-blowing, I have to say, on many levels. First is I've got a festival happening next month. It's all about living from the heart and activity. And all five elements that you've mentioned all we're tapping into that very intuitively, which is we're doing it at a former palace, which is in near some woods in nature. It's an extremely beautiful sanctuary. And there's going to be poets and dancing and ballet and Sufi music. So everything that you've said encompassed, you've just described what I need to be writing in my copy, actually. So thank you for that gift. Wow. So let's move into what you're currently doing, because I'm just, again, blown away by the series of transformations you've been going through. So share with our viewers and listeners a bit more about your music, the music scene you're now in. What is it that you're exactly doing?
So a year and a half ago, two young rock stars, 30-somethings, who were a group called The Kin. And as The Kin, they performed with Coldplay, toured with Pink, etc. They approached me. We were friends. We're all in a leadership group of transformational leaders, actually. And they had met me, and they knew my music background and my performance background, and they knew I hadn't really done anything much for a while. And they approached me at one point and said, one of our things we do when we're not performing is we take songwriters on a journey to bring their music out and actually record an EP, a small album. And we think this would be an awesome project for you. And of course, I would pay them to do this. So I said yes. But before I said yes, I said, does it matter that I've never even wanted to write a song, let alone compose an album, let alone release an album? And they kind of laughed and said, no, we think it's in you. And sure enough, it was. And it was a wild journey to be led by these two amazing young guys who are brilliant, super creative, deeply spiritual. They became two of my very closest friends to go on this process together of them coming up with certain musical ideas based on learning about me. They did a deep dive into me for the last 60 years of my life, of what made my heart sing, what made my life successful, what were the failures, what were the loves, what were the heartaches, what was the music I loved when I was young, what is the music I love now. They really tried to dive inside me and then kind of downloads music that they felt reflected me. And then we began to work on it together, the songs that I love, resulting in an album which just was released last week called Renaissance Human, or as we'd say here, Renaissance Human. And it really is an expression of the fullness of creativity. The Renaissance man concept that has been around for some time was to describe an individual who was skilled in multiple areas, but there were artistic elements, not just banking or being a lawyer or being a doctor. So a Renaissance man embraced multiple diverse sets of skills. And at a certain point, people started saying that about me in the last few years, like, you're a Renaissance man. You've done all this business stuff. You teach at Stanford. You're a singer. You're a dancer, photographer. And so I kind of embraced that finally and thought, but it's rather gender insensitive. So let's update the concept. And Renaissance human was the term that I came up with to say that's where the future could be. We could be, as a race, we could be embracing the fullness of our creativity instead of shutting so much of it down. So the music, because I used to be here in the city in musical theater, I still have friends here. I still have family here that are still in the business. I've met new friends. I've performed 4 times here in Manhattan in the last several months since I moved back. I have friends that are Broadway composers, Broadway pianists, jazz pianists, great actors and stars from Broadway. New York is famous for a lot of things. Its art and culture scene is crazy. I mean, at any given night, there's so many performances, so many things going on that you can participate in, be an observer in, et cetera. So I've been just kind of on a treasure hunt of finding the people to connect with and re-exploring that side of me. Meanwhile, I continue to be very involved in business too, but to bring this creativity idea more and more into the keynotes that I do. How can we bring the creative spirit into a company, into a leadership team? Not because we all need to become poets or dancers or artists, but because what company doesn't need to stay ahead of the curve in terms of innovation and being, in that more than ever, things can change so fast now. And so you've got to, and so if people don't have that ability to contribute and get creative, and I've started to use this phrase, it's not just about stepping out of our comfort zone, it's about expanding our comfort zone. We have a too small a comfort zone. So yeah, you can jump out of it on a weekend retreat and then jump back in. Okay, great, but what good has that done? You've had a fun weekend. But what about expanding it? Meaning, what about having more things in life being okay, things that you can be comfortable in and eventually even get good at? So to me, that's all part of the process that I'm kind of into, of whether that's through keynote talks, through mentoring, whatever, is bringing this idea of accepting that every human being is innately creative, but few of us have had that really developed, except maybe in one aspect of life, but not fully. And so there's all this that could come out that could contribute and help us be more fulfilled, but we haven't had a chance to express it yet or even discover it yet.
My own beliefs is that when somebody is ignoring their own creativity, it's almost like they're keeping their own real worth, like, I don't want to use the word suppressed, but I've got to use it, I guess. They're keeping it suppressed. And so a key problem across the board, across society, no matter how successful someone is in business or otherwise, is this lack of tapping into. So if our business owners, our leaders wanted to get hold of you, what's the best way to get hold of you, perhaps for a keynote or interaction? Do you do consultations as well?
Yes, absolutely. I consult with companies, I mentor. I tend to work one-on-one with entrepreneurs or leaders of companies. It could be multi-million-dollar companies, whatever. My website is my name, brucepryor.com. My email is my name, brucepryor@gmail. So it's pretty straightforward. So that's the best way. At brucepryor.com, you kind of get an overview of the more business-oriented stuff. I don't have as much about the creativity stuff on there yet, but that's starting to get there. But that'd be the best.
If people wanted to watch you perform, Broadway or wherever you're performing, is that going to be, the details are going to be on the website, I presume?
Pretty much. If people go to Facebook, most of what I post is public. So you could go to my Bruce Cryer personal page and just scroll down. You'll see videos from this last concert that we did, iPhone videos of songs that are from the album that we performed the other night, a week ago. And I do have a section on the brucepryor.com site of events that I'm doing. That could be workshops, it could be webinars, whatever it is that I'm currently doing. I have no Broadway performances coming up at the moment, but that's in the offing.
If your life was one message to the world, so not just what you've got to say, but your whole life, because I know you're one of those most integral people that I've met, what is that key message to listeners, viewers, humanity?
I realized about 30 years ago that this life, I am a man of love and peace. And I was raised by parents who believed deeply in both of those values. And I embraced it fully. And when I joined this group called HeartMath, it was to explore it and develop that side of me, a man of love. And as I walked through New York City, as I was doing yesterday between appointments, I was trying to be as loving as I could. That didn't mean just being all sweet and nice and handing out roses, but just having compassion for the homeless people on the street, for the people rushing, looking so frantic and so stressed out and so overwhelmed with life. And I've learned how to be above that at times, or to be able to go through that without it taking me down and taking me out. And if there's one thing that I learned from my journey of the health crises and hearing the word life-threatening thrown around quite a lot for a couple of years, is that you can survive. And if you stay true to your heart, you will not only survive, but you can thrive. And so what I want to do in every way that I can is to inspire people to realize the power of love, which is completely what energizes creativity, is still something most of us are just, I feel myself, I'm just scratching the surface. I'm at the top of the glacier, where only the part that we can see above the surface, there's all this below the surface. Well, I'm just the dust on the top of the iceberg. That's as far as I feel like I've explored, meaning I feel there's so much more to go. So, but it's through love, and it's through compassion, and it's through recognizing. My belief is that religion, politics, gender identity, national identity, none of those things ethnicity will ever unite us. What can unite us is the power of love and the shared experience of beauty. And if we can truly love and love nature and love, as I look at you, Harun, and having met you in person, you're a marvelous human being. I feel great love for you. And I feel that it's a gift and an honor to know you. And I wish that feeling for more people, to love other people that they come across in life. And I believe that is how we can start to heal some of the painful, horrific divisions that this planet is suffering under now, and the earth itself, to love the earth itself. So it's a message of love.
It's fascinating to hear this from a CEO, a corporate person. Despite people can usually associate love with new age woo-woo people, and actually no, it's no matter how high up the scale you are as a business owner, a transformational leader, without this lovingness, I like that word, lovingness, without this lovingness, there's this separation and this fear. So wow, I'm humbled. Yes, it was certainly amazing meeting you. To be honest, when I came over to California for a couple of months, I had no clue who I was going to meet up. I just knew I had to let go of any preconceived ideas as to who to meet up. Now, HeartMath is an organization. I'll put a link on the notes for anyone not knowing what the organization is. HeartMath is an organization which is doing absolutely phenomenal work. And actually, truth be told, it was only night before I met you, I thought, okay, let me just check up Bruce, because I know he's a Facebook friend. He's not too far from me. Oh, former CEO of HeartMath. Oops, I should have read up on that. But then when we connected, it was absolutely magical. I can't wait to see you again when I come back to America. And definitely next year, hopefully next year, within the next 2 years, we will perhaps get together and do the festival, because everything that you're preaching and living is actually in total resonance with the work that I'm also taking out to the world. And there's a whole bunch of us wanting to do that. What's any question that, if you're in my shoes, is there a question that you would have liked for me to ask?
That's a great question. I feel like we covered all the key things that I would have wanted to have said. And, I guess I would just say again, knowing that so many of your listeners, your viewers, are business owners, CEOs, entrepreneurs, that to be able to connect with like-minded, like-hearted people is so important. I found when I became CEO, there was nobody in the organization that I could really relate to on that level, meaning they'd never been a CEO of anything. And so there was nobody around that could really feel for what I was going through, the complexity I was dealing with, and wow, this is bigger than being a EVP, and all that. And to have colleagues that I could trust, mentors that I could go to, became very important. So I think that's undervalued in our society in general, the importance of that. And especially for men, men tend to have this, I can do it. I'll soldier on. I've got to do it. I'm the provider. I've got to do it on my own, kind of the stiff upper lip British thing, or the, American rugged individualist kind of thing. And, but I think that, to our peril, yeah, we can do it, but to our peril. Yeah, I was doing it, but I got kind of sick. And again, it's not totally a linear connection. And yet, yeah, there were definitely connections. When I was really reflecting, yeah, there were things I had said no to in my life, that things I cut off that were part of why I got sick. I was not fully myself. And so I think I would just encourage people to find ways to connect and have deeper conversations. You made the comment about love often being associated with more new age kind of things, or sport. Here's the irony to me. Here in the U.S., the American football, the massive, are these people actually human, or they've just been created in a lab? These guys that are warriors, complete warriors, and massive. And you always hear them talking about love. I mean, I love my guys. Our guys played with so much heart today. We came back, but we never gave up. And my guys love each other, and they love to work together. And the love word comes out all the time when it's in sport. And the more brutal the sport, the more love seems to come out. At least American football, you hear it a lot. You hear it in basketball. Coaches have no problem saying, I love my guys. Man, I love them. We play well together. They love each other. So the irony to me is that when it comes to highly competitive, even dangerous things, it's okay to talk about love, and it doesn't seem strange because you're kind of doing battle together. So it's okay to love the guy in the trenches with you, your fellow soldier, but your cubicle mate, or the person you see in the corporate lounge. Oh, that's good. Don't talk about that. Really? We can talk about it in battle or in warrior games, but not in this situation. So to me, it's just, okay, that's upside down. Let's change that, because in reality, the more customers feel cared for, loved, the more loyal they're going to be. The more employees feel valued, loved, the more they stay, and the more creative and the more effective they are. The more people, the more a culture represents inclusion and care and compassion, the more people want to stay and the more engaged they are. All this we know now from all the psychosocial research around companies. The L word still, don't say the L word.
I think you've hit the nail on the head for all our business owners, our directors, etc., influencers, is that love is the spirit of the warrior. Without love, you cannot be that samurai, that influencer, that person who's going to impact the people of the planet, not just your profits.
Yes, exactly.
Brilliant. Bruce Cryer, thank you so much for joining the Harun Rabbani Show. Lots of love to you, my friend. I honor you for sharing your valuable time with our listeners, and obviously with myself as well. And yes, we will have you back on the show, and I want to interview you live, as in me and you in the same room at the same time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. My pleasure, Harun. Have a great day.
If this resonates with you, make sure you share widely. Make sure you also implement what you can into your life. And if you are in New York or any other part of the world where Bruce is performing, make sure you go and watch him. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye for now.